This is the Capitol Rundown.
For him to collapse like this is a phenomenal failure of leadership, of the ability to organize, and the ability to deliver when you need to deliver.
There are a lot of great things that are happening in the economy. There are a lot of pressure points, and we're all feeling it. You know, individuals are feeling it when they go to the grocery store and gas up their car.
There are so many different challenges that are in front of people today. There's a rising cost environment that is hitting almost every industry.
We literally wrote a bill, introduced it in the House and Senate, passed it in a week, and had the president sign it by the end of the week. I don't know if that's ever happened before.
It's all straight ahead. The Capitol Rundown starts now.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Lauren Thompson. The race for governor is heating up, and it's charging ahead with 5 fewer people in the running for the Republican nomination. That's after the State Elections Bureau said they had too many fraudulent signatures to meet the minimum required to be on the ballot. And this week, many of them, including 2 frontrunners, were dealt a legal blow by a Michigan appeals court. Tim Skubic is here for you this morning with Andrew Burkle to break it all down.
Thanks for joining us this week, Tim. And 4 Republicans and 2 of the major players in the race for governor have been struck off the ballot, barring a Supreme Court decision. What is the latest on this crazy story that just seems to keep going?
Yeah, it's an incredible story in Michigan political history. Let's underscore the fact that we have not heard yet from the state Supreme Court. So assuming, which you're never supposed to do in journalism, but we have to assume here, that the Supremes keep off the ballot Mr. Perry Johnson and Mr. James Craig and others. This changes the whole face of the Republican primary for governor. First there were 10, now there are supposedly 5. And taking out Mr. Perry Johnson, who was going to self-fund and had lots of dollars, and taking out James Craig, who was doing quite well in Detroit, those are 2 major losses for the Republican Party from a standpoint of candidates who might have been able to win this nomination and then go on to beat Governor Gretchen Whitmer. We now have 5 Republicans standing. There originally were 10. Garrett Soldano is one of them, Ryan Kelly, Tudor Dixon, Kevin Rinke, and Reverend LeBand. And they are the ones that are supposedly in, assuming that Mr. Johnson and Mr. Craig and the others are kept off the ballot by the Supreme Court.
I saw you talking a little bit about this earlier in the week, but from the start of the bizarre announcement on Belle Isle until where he got struck off the ballot for fraudulent signatures, what happened with the Craig campaign?
Wow. You know, somebody's going to write an extensive story on this, because what started out was such great potential. Mr. Craig had the backing of some influential Republicans behind the scenes who wanted him to get this nomination. For him to collapse like this is a phenomenal failure of leadership, of the ability to organize, and the ability to deliver when you need to deliver. To not get enough valid petition signatures is basically a major flaw in any candidate's effort. If you can't get on the ballot, it doesn't matter how good you are. He ran into problems. He went through 3 campaign managers. He was raising very little money, and there didn't appear to be anything there. And so this candidacy, if indeed he stays off the ballot, was almost, I don't want to say it was doomed from the get-go, but the launch was ugly, and it sort of went downhill from there.
In light of all this messiness and craziness with the 4 candidates, like 5 originally who were struck off the ballot, it seems that Tudor Dixon has kind of risen from the ashes and seems to be kind of picking up some momentum, including a big endorsement this week, right?
Well, she's had a very good month of May. Tudor Dixon, who was about 2% in the polls of name ID, has not moved that needle, but she can now start to move that needle with the endorsement a couple of weeks ago of the DeVos family, which will come with it some major money. And also, she just picked up this week the endorsement of Michigan Right to Life. Those 2 combinations move her, if not the front runner, certainly among the front runners. And I think the other guy that probably would be in there would be Kevin Rinke. So she's had a great May. Let's just point out, however, that you do want to have the Right to Life endorsement in a Republican primary for governor. It carries a lot of weight, it carries some money, and of course it carries a lot of grassroots people. However, it is not automatic that the person with the Right to Life endorsement gets the nomination, and history proves that that is the case. In 2010, when Rick Snyder was on the ballot, he did not get the Right to Life endorsement. Mike Cox, the then Attorney General, did. Mr. Cox did not get the nomination. Mr. Snyder did. And so while you want to have the right to life endorsement, it's not an automatic ticket to getting the nomination. But she's had a pretty good run so far.
Tim, real quickly, I don't know if you're a betting man, but with everything that's gone on, especially with two of the big names, what would you say Whitmer's chance of getting reelected is at this moment?
First of all, it's very interesting. The governor is saying squat. She hasn't said beans about what's going on in the Republican primary, which from a political standpoint is the right way to go. You know what? In the middle of a fist fight, you don't want to get in the middle of that. You want to just step back and let the other guys do whatever they're going to do and mess up their primary and blah, 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 blah. And she can sit back and say, you know, I like what I'm seeing. Now, look, the election is not held today. The governor clearly has some negatives, but you can't beat Governor Whitmer without somebody, and we don't know who that somebody is. In a generic governor's race for the Republicans, that is, we don't know who it is, we just know they're a Republican, she does have some problems. So the governor's got some problems of her own, but on balance, what she is seeing going on in the Republican primary right now must be making her very, very pleased.
All right, interesting as always, Tim. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you both. Coming up next here on The Rundown, we head to Mackinac Island, where political leaders gathered this week to talk about the biggest issues facing our state. We'll hear from the governor right after the break. Stay with us. Politicians from all across the state and from our nation's capital gathered for the Mackinac Policy Conference this week. And as always, much of the conversation was centered around Michigan's economy and economic outlook. Governor Gretchen Whitmer was on the island, where she talked about her achievements in her first term in office. She says the state's revenue is far higher than anticipated. Businesses are still struggling with higher prices on almost everything due to inflation.
Well, there are a lot of strengths. You know, there are a lot of great things that are happening in the economy. There are a lot of pressure points, and we're all feeling it. You know, individuals are feeling it when they go to the grocery store and gas up their car. These businesses are much the same, right? And so I just got done talking with the Mich Auto Group. You know, we know that semiconductor shortage is putting pressure on everywhere in the supply chain, and that's why we're working so hard to make sure that as we lure investment into Michigan, that it is in spaces that actually solve problems.
A survey released by the Detroit Regional Chamber at the conference shows that in an open-ended question, the most important issue in the state is the economy and inflation right now. They were number one by a wide margin over any other issues. Nearly 73% of the respondents to that survey say they think the state's economy is on the wrong track. Well, now to more conversations about navigating the economy, this time with Michigan U.S. Senator Debbie Stabenow. She talked about finding relief for an issue that goes beyond economics to a very real and scary problem, the shortage of baby formula. Take a listen.
Half the baby formula in the country goes to poor moms and babies under WIC. And so this is directly under my responsibility in the Agriculture Committee. And so I went into hyper gear. We literally wrote a bill, introduced it in the House and Senate, passed it in a week, and had the president sign it by the end of the week. I don't know if that's ever happened before, but it's because it was so serious. And this is creating the flexibility to get WIC moms the formula for their babies.
Stabenow says supply chain problems and lack of safety inspections due to the pandemic were factors in the shutdown of one Michigan production facility, and that closure is a major reason behind this shortage. Stabenow says importing foreign formula supplies will help in the short term until the plant here in Michigan opens again. A former Lieutenant Governor Brian Calley was also on the island as part of his new role as leader of the Small Business Association of Michigan. He says he sees many people taking advantage of a post-pandemic economy and opening their own businesses, but there are challenges.
As a response to just the uncertainty and the in this newfound understanding, life is short, and now is the time to go out there and take a chance and make something happen. But there are so many different challenges that are in front of people today. There's a rising cost environment that is hitting almost every industry, in every aspect of industry. There are supply chain disruptions that it's like whack-a-mole trying to solve the problems. As soon as you get one aspect solved, there's another blip that comes up.
Well, there's still a lot to cover here this morning. Up next, we catch up with the Republican candidate hoping to take the state attorney general's office away from current AG Dana Nessel. The Capitol Rundown. We'll be right back. The race for Attorney General is on. This week we caught up with Republican Matthew DePerno, who's running against current Attorney General Dana Nessel, who's a Democrat. He shared his top priorities.
Education is a big issue in the state of Michigan, and we need to get kids back in school learning arithmetic, history, things like that. And they're not doing that right now. Number one, they've been out of school because of COVID shutdowns. There's been there's a mental health crisis in the state right now that needs to be addressed. So education, mental health issues are a top priority. As soon as I'm sworn in as Attorney General, I will issue an opinion eliminating critical race theory across the state of Michigan. We've got teachers right now trying to teach kids as low as first grade these outrageous sexual education programs, and that's going to end. I'm going to return the voice of the parents back to school rather than government, and that's what our children need right now. And again, we need to focus on mental health across the state, and it's not being done. It's largely ignored, and we're going to change that. Law enforcement is a big issue right now. Dana Nessel is out persecuting police across the state for simply doing their job. I'm going to stand with law enforcement. As the top cop in the state, I'll always have the back of law enforcement. Enforcing the law and protecting the Constitution is one of my primary talking points. I think Donald Trump is still the leader of the Republican Party. He still helps set policy for the Republican Party, and he's certainly a force within the party. So, there's a lot of people that love Donald Trump. I'm one of them. I can't think of no better endorsement to have than the former president.
Well, there's still a lot ahead here on the Capitol Rundown this morning. Up next, there's been a lot of talk about wiping out student loans, but that's about to come true for some former college students. We'll detail the president's new plan for you next. The Biden administration is wiping out student debt for more than 500,000 people who went to Corinthian colleges. That's the for-profit school that filed for bankruptcy and closed in 2015. Corinthian Colleges has been accused of illegal recruiting tactics and other predatory behavior. This week, the Capitol Rundown caught up with the domestic policy advisor to the vice president, who breaks this all down for us. We also asked her what this means for other student loans.
This builds upon the vice president's work as then Attorney General Harris of California, who brought a suit against Corinthian College for what at the time they were finding was Corinthian College, the claims of deceptive and fraudulent practices. And what we're talking about is that for-profit college using predatory practices to go after single mothers, single fathers, veterans, people living at or below poverty, and using those practices to entice them to enroll in the school and then not being able to produce on the outcomes in terms of jobs and job placement. I certainly won't get ahead of the president and the vice president on that issue. But what we do know is that the Department of Education has already been able to forgive $25 billion of loan forgiveness around the country for a number of different programs, public service, veterans, others. We also know that since they have taken office, there has been a student loan pause for people understanding about the economy and the time that we're in, given the pandemic and all of that. So I don't have any news today, but on that piece, but I do think that it's an ongoing conversation.
Well, don't go anywhere, because after the break, we head to Washington, D.C. for the latest on the bipartisan effort to address recent gun violence across the nation. The Capitol Rundown. We'll be right back. The bipartisan group of senators tasked with coming up with a bill addressing gun violence across the nation says those talks are going well. The senators met virtually this week, hoping to come up with a compromise to bring back to Washington when they all return next week. Our Capitol correspondent Anna Wernicke is here for you now with more.
These conversations have been very productive.
Connecticut Democrats Richard Blumenthal and Chris Murphy said Thursday they're optimistic the Senate can reach a deal on a gun safety bill.
There are more Republicans engaged today than ever before in these talks. We've had really productive discussions. Our goal is to get a piece of legislation that saves lives.
Murphy says the 9 Democrat and Republican senators tasked with reaching a compromise are close to striking a deal.
It could break the logjam, a 30-year logjam in which Congress hasn't done anything meaningful to stop this pace of mass shootings.
Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell is also expressing optimism, but says any gun deal will have to target the, quote, actual problem.
Mental illness and school safety. This needs to be done and must be done consistent with the Constitution.
Blumenthal says he's pushing for expanded background checks and red flag laws,
which separates people from guns when they're dangerous to themselves or others.
But South Carolina Republican Senator Lindsey Graham says he won't support a federal red flag law, favoring instead a, quote, grant program to help states that choose to go down that road.
There is still a lot of work to do.
Still, Blumenthal says getting any bill across the finish line is progress.
Even if we're unable to accomplish all that we want, at least we will save lives.
In Washington, I'm Anna Wernicke.
Well, that's our show for this week. Thanks for watching the Capitol Rundown. We hope to see you here again next weekend.